thank you so much for joining us this evening. We have Brad Nahill, who's the co-founder and president of Sea Turtles, talking with us this evening. We're really excited to have him here and to learn about his organization and the efforts that he's been making to understand these amazing creatures. So, all right, I'll get started here. I'd like to introduce Brad. He's worked in sea turtle conservation, ecotourism, and environmental education for over 20 years. He is the editor and lead writer of Sea Turtle Research Conservation Lessons from the Field by Elsevier Press. In 2020, I probably butchered that. And he's also a co-author of the Worldwide Travel Guide to Sea Turtles in 2014. He's a National Geographic Explorer and was awarded the President's Award for his work as the chair of the awards committee of the International Sea Turtle Society. Under his leadership, the organization has helped save more than 20 million hatchlings, raised millions for turtle conservation, and connected thousands of people with local conservation efforts around the world. The organization has won awards from Travel and Leisure and the World Travel and Tourism Council and others for their work to protect these endangered animals. So with that, I will turn it over to Brad for him to share his presentation with us. Thank you, Brad.
Great. Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to be here. Thank you all for joining this evening. I had a chance to come down to Fort Bragg a couple of weeks ago and checked out the Noyo Center, the great little educational facility that you guys have there. That orca skeleton you guys have is just absolutely amazing in that immersive dome. It was really cool. And so I really enjoyed it. I wish I had been able to do this in person then, but I really loved the area. You can see my husky there in the background and blurred out, trying to get herself comfortable on the back of this couch. It's not a place where she normally sits. And then that's a cat right there, and then that's also blurred out. But
they're getting a front row seat for your presentation.
exactly. Yes. So yeah, as everyone's welcome. All species. But so yeah, I'm excited to be here. I'm going to show you guys a presentation about sea turtles in general, and I'll talk a little bit about my organization's work. But I just yeah, thank you for having me. I know you guys have my good friend Katerina there now, and have some big plans there in the future. So it's great to be talking with you guys. So give me 1 second here to share my screen. There we go. And I'm going to get this started. Okay. So it is intentionally a black screen. That's not a technical issue, at least not yet. Yeah, I have been working with animals, the sea turtles, SEA turtles, for about 25 years now. I first went to work with these animals in Costa Rica in 1999. And I'll tell you though, when I first went to work with them, I knew like nothing about these animals. I didn't study them in college. I got a degree in environmental economics. I was just going down to like do something good for my resume and help kind of, get my career started. But I had no intention of working with these animals. I'm not a biologist. But so I went to volunteer with a sea turtle conservation project in Costa Rica. When I went online to find volunteer programs in Latin America to volunteer with, almost all of them were sea turtle projects and almost all of them were in Costa Rica for some reason that they figured out that people would, pay a little bit to come and volunteer before anyone else. And so that was with the option. So I said, I guess I'm going to work with turtles in Costa Rica. And so that's what I did. The first night I went out to the nesting beach. It kind of looked like this. It was in the middle of nowhere. And here, you need to go do something else. Huskies love to chit chat, and will be a little bit distracting. So I'm going to have her go elsewhere. Um, so yeah, I didn't know what I was getting into. And so I went out onto the beach that night, no lights, no moon, no anything. And I'm walking along on a patrol of the beach, going out to look for the nesting turtles. And this is pretty much what we saw. So we went out on the beach. There's waves coming in on one side, there's jungle sounds on the other, and I am really, out of my element and very tired. It was late at night, but we see a little flash of light up ahead, a little flash of red. And so I'm told from the other people that this is a signal from the other people on the beach that they found a turtle and they need our help. So we quickly picked up our pace, walked quickly down the beach, and this is what we came across. Now, that this exact turtle, but it was on this beach. This is a leatherback sea turtle from Costa Rica. And I really had no idea that this was the animal that I was going to be. Read about them a little bit, but until you see one in person, just their sheer size, and they look like a special effect from a movie. Um, it's really hard to understand what this animal is until you see it there in person. And so I really enjoyed that experience and fell in love with these animals. A few years later, I started my organization, Sea Turtles, spelled SEE Turtles. And like I said, I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a little bit. But it's been, a wonderful 25 years of working with these animals. And yeah, really, really am very lucky to have the job that I do. So I call my presentation Mysteries of the Ocean because, there's a lot that we know about these animals, but there's so much that we don't know. Even now, after 60, 70 years of pretty intensive study in many places around the world, there's still a lot of things that we don't know about these animals. So I'll talk a lot about what we do know, and I'll also bring up a few things that we don't, some of the mysteries that we're still trying to solve. So around the world, there are considered 7 species of sea turtles. These are all the ones that you can find. If you count them real quickly, you'll see that there's actually 8 pictures up here. But as of now, the two on the far right, in the bottom right corner, and the top right corner are both considered the same species. They're both considered green turtles. The one in the top right corner are the types of green turtles that you will find here in the Pacific of the Americas, and they're called the black turtle, and they are considered right now a subspecies of the green turtle. Although they have some very significant differences. They look pretty different. They're named black turtle. Their shells are much darker than you would think of as a typical green sea turtle. And I do know experts that work with them that still believe there was a long period of controversy where some people believe there were 8 species and some people believe there were 7 and that this one was a subspecies. So consensus now is 7, but there are still some people holding out that they do think that that might actually be an 8th species. So that's one of the kind of mysteries that's still out there right now. The big one here, kind of in the middle, that's the leatherback. They're one of the largest reptiles on the planet, by far the biggest of any kind of turtles, terrestrial or marine. Really just truly amazing animals and are different in so many ways. They're almost a different class that they have a lot of adaptations. They split off in the evolutionary tree from the other sea turtles quite a long time ago. So it's estimated that sea turtles have been around for more than 100 million years. And it's estimated that leatherbacks developed 60 or 70 million years ago. So they're one of the most ancient species on the planet. Down here on the bottom, eating the horseshoe crab, that is a loggerhead turtle. Uh, in the bottom left corner is the hawksbill. Top left corner is the Kemp's Ridley. Closely related to that one, but a different species, is the olive ridley, which you can find on the top here. And then the shiny looking one here is the flatback, which can only be found out around Australia. So around the United States, you can find the leatherbacks, both the greens and the black turtles. So you can find the black turtles in Hawaii, and the green turtles in Florida and in the Caribbean. The olive ridley will occasionally pass off of the Oregon and California coast, getting off course. They don't generally tend to go this far north, but we have found them stranded here in Oregon, and if that's the case, I'm sure they've been found in California as well. And then the Kemp's ridley can be found in the Gulf of Mexico primarily and up the East Coast. And then the hawksbills can be found, actually hawksbills and loggerheads can both be found in Florida and around some of the Caribbean territories. But here on the West Coast, we're mostly just seeing leatherbacks and greens. The leatherback turtle, for you guys where you're based, um, in the Pacific will come all the way across the Pacific Ocean from Malaysia and Indonesia to Monterey Bay in particular, and then up the coast all the way up to Alaska. They're the only sea turtle species that can survive in cold waters. And between the borders of Oregon and California, there is actually a Pacific leatherback conservation area that protects them from fishing off the U.S. West Coast. So there's very few of those left. That's one of the most endangered sea turtle populations in the world. But yeah, we do have them in California and Oregon waters at times. So those are all the types of sea turtles you can find in the world. So where can you find sea turtles? Almost everywhere. Their range is most of the ocean, especially when you're bringing in the leatherbacks who can manage that cold water. They can go up to Nova Scotia and Canada, and like I said, Alaska here uh, in the US. And so this gives you an idea of the range. This is just one species. This is just the green turtle. And those little circles there are nesting beaches. And this probably isn't even all of it. It's definitely not even all of them. So there are hundreds of beaches in dozens of countries where the sea turtles are living. Just give me one quick second. Sorry about that. The dog was getting a little bit too distracting, so I had to go put her elsewhere. She doesn't usually sit there and whine next to me during a presentation, so I apologize for that.
No
Um,
problem. All of us with pets can completely relate.
yeah, but she doesn't normally do that. But yeah, I don't want to, I didn't want to be distracted, and I didn't want everyone to be hearing that like high pitched whining in the background. I don't know if you could hear it, but I certainly could. So anyway, um, So yeah, why are sea turtles important? They're important for a lot of reasons. When we talk about really any animal out there, we're talking about in terms of their importance are primarily what they eat, what eats them, and how they interact with the other elements of their habitats, of their ecosystems where they live. And so sea turtles are one of the most important species in the ocean. They are keystone species that depend, that a lot of other animals depend on. When they're hatchlings like this one or eggs, they are food for so many different species. So just to give you an idea, because it's hard to tell the scale of this, that hatchling is probably about that big. So, they're pretty small. Their shells are not fully hardened yet. They're made out of keratin and they get thick and hard and really protective as they grow older. But as hatchlings, they're very easy prey. And so they're eaten by domestic animals like dogs, speaking of dogs and cats, um, in a lot of places where people might not have the money to spay or neuter their animal, may not be able to provide a lot of food for them, or where there's a lot of feral animals. There are places where they will dig up nests, they will eat hatchlings. But, their primary predators are wild animals, especially birds. So we're talking about pelicans, frigate birds, things like that, coastal birds. We'll scoop them up as they swim out to sea. Fish will grab them as they head out to sea. Crabs will grab the hatchlings on their way from the beach into the water and pull them down into their little holes and eat them. There is a type of fly that in some places will lay its larva on top of the nest on the beach, and then the larva will climb down through the sand to the nest and eat the eggs before they develop, which as a turtle researcher, you don't want to come across a nest like that. It's very gross. It's one of the grosser things that I've had to do in this field. But it is a natural predator, even though not one that you would think of. Ants will sometimes do that as well. And then mammals like raccoons, and this one here is called a coati. It's a rainforest mammal that you can find in many places around Central America and Mexico. They will dig up the nests and eat the eggs themselves, among other mammals. Um, yeah, and also, that I will talk more about later, people. In a lot of places, people eat turtle eggs, people eat turtle meat. People don't really eat the hatchlings, but in a lot of places, they're considered to be a type of natural aphrodisiac, even though, there's no scientific basis for that. So, especially when I'm talking to school groups and I show this slide, I get a lot of them going, "Oh, that's so sad." And yeah, like yes, it's definitely sad for that individual hatchling. But the reality is that sea turtles evolved over millions of years to be able to do this. They will lay anywhere from 80 to more than 200 eggs in a nest, depending upon the species. And then some of them will come back 2 times or 3 times in a season. The leatherbacks are known to come back five, six, seven. I've heard of as many as 10 times in one season, 10 nests in one season. And they have the biggest eggs and the fewest number. So they're like around 80 or so. But that can be, you know, several hundred eggs per season. And then they're laying usually every couple of years. In some cases, they'll lay every year, but usually every couple of years for 30, 40, 50 years. And so if you do all that math, on average, they can lay around 5,000 eggs over their lifetime. And so our best guess is maybe about 1 out of 1,000 of those hatchlings grows up to be an adult. So the hope is that at least a handful of those thousands of hatchlings grow up to be adults and replace their parents and help the population. Now, even that estimate is a bit of a mystery. I see it really used really, really commonly in the community of sea turtle educators and stuff. And really, it's based on one study, and it's not the most robust data set. We don't really have a way yet to be able to follow them over their lifetimes to really understand exactly how many are surviving. So even that is a bit of a mystery, even though it's the most common number that we give. But so, the thing that makes them important is that they are providing so much food for so many different species that really depend on there being hatchlings and eggs for them to eat to survive. Once they're full grown, their number of predators declines pretty dramatically. So the biggest sharks, the white sharks and tiger sharks, are their primary predators. They're one of the only animals out there big enough to be able to, and strong enough to be able to bite through that shell. I did actually learn, I led a group to the Galapagos a couple of months ago and learned that orcas will predate the sea turtles. It's one of the only places that I've heard about that, and they actually had an incredible photo of an orca. And I need to get a copy of it, tossing a sea turtle up in the air. Like the orca came out of the water, flipped it up, and it looked like it was 20 or 30 feet in the air. This was a truly stunning photograph. Everybody thinks that, the dolphins are, the friendly ones because they kind of have a little bit of a smile, and really no, they're pretty mean. They will really mess with the other animals, like just like use them for play. And yeah, they're definitely not the friendliest of ocean animals. I've also seen pictures recently, some photos came out of Komodo dragons eating them in Indonesia. And in Costa Rica, there is a phenomenon that is just really, we're really starting to understand is jaguars eating sea turtles. So there are nesting beaches right where the beach comes right up to the rainforest, and the jaguars will come out of the water. There's one beach in particular on the Pacific coast of Costa Rica where they're out there pretty much every night. And so if you're a researcher, you're not getting in between a jaguar and its sea turtle. And they're both endangered. So, you let nature take its course in those kinds of things. But as you can see here in the photo, they will eat around the head and neck, primarily in the shoulders, and then try to get in from there. But they can't really open up the shell. But, cats are smart, and they have figured out that there's this basically defenseless, other than the shell, slow-moving animal out on that beach. And they get quite a few there too. They get a lot of nests at that particular beach. So another thing that makes sea turtles important are for what they eat. And so you may be familiar with them, the fact that they eat jellyfish. The leatherback in particular really, really, really loves the jellyfish. In fact, that's all that they eat. Now, jellyfish are almost all water. There's very little fat or nutrition in them. So they have to eat a lot of them. And that's why they're going up to places like Alaska. And they can be, several 100-pound jellyfish out there. And so the leatherbacks, it is estimated that they can eat, when they're feeding, more than half their body weight per day, which is pretty extraordinary for the amount of calories that they're burning. And to maintain that huge size of theirs, they just have to be constantly eating them. Fortunately for the leatherbacks and the other turtles, is they're immune to the sting of the jellyfish. So it is not bothering them, because that would be a miserable life for your food to sting you every time you ate it, especially if you had to eat that much of it. But a leatherback turtle, on average, these days, they're probably they're between 6 and say 800 pounds. So you're talking about 400 plus pounds of jellyfish per day that they're eating, which is really extraordinary. And so I love to tell people, like, hey, why is protecting sea turtles important? Well, if you like to swim in the ocean, they're one of the few animals that are eating these jellyfish, and jellyfish populations are really exploding around the world. So that makes these turtles really all the more important. Now, pretty much all species of sea turtles will eat jellyfish opportunistically, but mostly they specialize. Um, oh wait, hold on one second. It's got a little. Um, yeah. So mostly sorry, I'm going to go back to that. Mostly they specialize. So the other animals will eat uh, the other species will eat other animals. So the loggerhead turtles, if you remember from that first slide, they eat crustaceans. So that's crabs and urchins, lobsters, things like that. They have these big, strong jaws, and they can bite through the shells of the crustaceans. The green turtles are considered primarily herbivores, vegetarians of the sea turtle world, because they eat algae and seagrass. And their name actually comes from, not from the color of their shell, but the color of their fat. If you've heard of turtle soup being eaten in the past, sea turtle in particular, not like a snapper soup, would turn the fat green. The fat would turn the soup green. So that's why they got their name green turtles, because that's primarily their food. In certain life stages, they will eat other things, but that's mostly what they eat, especially as adults. The hawksbill sea turtles, on the other hand, focus mostly on sea sponges. And sea sponges compete with coral for space in a reef. And so sponges can take over. And hawksbills can eat up to around 1,000 pounds of sponges per year. And so that really helps helps coral reefs to grow and expand. So we call them, for that reason, kind of the engineers of the coral reef. So sea turtles are also really important for people, for coastal communities around the world. Turtle watching is a big and growing activity in many places. A lot of communities depend on that money for tourism. So they are a big draw. Seeing the hatchlings. This is a leatherback hatchling photo that I took in Panama a couple of years ago, maybe my best individual photo ever that I've personally taken. Um, and so, yeah, they're really important for a lot of coastal communities. You know, a lot of people dive to see them snorkeling and then visiting the nesting beaches to see them laying their eggs. This is a project from Baja that I love to bring up as an example. The guy measuring the turtle right there used to be a turtle cook. Like he would cook the turtles for the fishing camps in this part of Baja, Mexico. But then he was hired on by a company that offered ecotourism, people to go and work hands-on with the sea turtles. And now he cooks for groups of conservationists for a conservation organization, and he's become one of the more dedicated conservationists that I know. So there's a lot of these amazing stories of people going from illegal hunting to conservation, you know, when conservationists make the effort to reach out to the communities. There are also a lot of indigenous cultures that worship sea turtles as ancestors. There are some that have creation myths of the earth being created on the back of a turtle. There is an indigenous community in Mexico that believes that the turtles coming back to nest are their ancestors coming back to visit. So they do have really important cultural um, they have cultural importance for indigenous communities all around the world. They have been coastal indigenous communities have been interacting with them as long as people have been living on the coast. So, why are sea turtles endangered? Now, when we talk about any animal being endangered, I always like to give an idea of what that means. So, you've probably heard, I'm sure you've heard the term before if you're, you know, someone who participates with NOYO. But, you know, it means that an animal has been dramatically reduced from previous levels and may be approaching extinction. And so, we talk about something being endangered, it's because of human causes. There are animals that have gone extinct. In fact, most animals that have lived on planet Earth have gone extinct for one reason or another over the billions of years that the planet has been here. When we talk about endangerment, it's specifically for human reasons. And so, to give you an idea of what these specific terms mean, these are all tracked by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, which has a thing called the Red List, which uh, has the status of most of the world's species. And so, to be considered vulnerable, the criteria for that is at least a 40% decline over 3 generations. So obviously that can vary between the species, but for sea turtles, a generation is generally, we believe, from 50 to 30 years. And even that is still a bit of a mystery. We're not even 100% sure exactly how long some of these species take. Leatherbacks are believed to be around 15 years, but I've heard people believe that it's more like 20 or 25. And then for green turtles, it's considered to be around 30 years, but I have other people who say they have data that shows it's more like 20. So if we say 20, 25 years as an average, so 3 generations would be like 60, 70 years. So at least a 40% drop in their population over that period of time. To be considered endangered, it's at least a 60% drop. And to be considered critically endangered, it's at least an 80% drop. Now, with the hawksbill turtle in particular, it's more like 90%. And I'll talk about that more in a minute here. And then data deficient is, you know, we don't have enough baseline data to know what it was like 60 or 70 years ago. Although the flatback in Australia, where it is mostly found, is considered endangered under their law. So not a great situation for sea turtles around the world, but there is some good news that I will talk about here in a couple of minutes. So why are they endangered? Well, one of the biggest reasons is getting caught in fishing gear. They get caught in nets, they get caught on hooks. This is a long line. These lines can be 100 miles long and have thousands of hooks on them, all of which are baited. And if that bait is something that attracts a sea turtle, they can get caught on it. You know, them being air breathing reptiles, they need to get up to the surface to breathe. And so they can drown if they're caught in these nets. And even if they are brought up to the surface, they don't, the fishermen don't always don't always release them alive. Sometimes it's easier for a fisherman to kill a turtle and damage its gear less, although that is changing. But even a turtle that gets caught a few times and survives, it's stressful. It can cause injury. So this is one of the biggest things happening to sea turtles around the world. I've mentioned that people do eat the turtle eggs and the meat of a few species. People don't generally eat very much leatherbacks or loggerheads. Greens are the primary one. Sometimes hawksbills will be eaten, but eggs are eaten pretty universally in most places around the world. Now, this has declined quite a bit, and in most places it's illegal. But I know I always like to give this perspective when I talk about this issue, because when I first went to Costa Rica and I saw and heard about this happening, I had this very kind of black and white view of the issue. The turtle protectors are good, and the people eating turtles are bad. But after living there, meeting the people in the communities, hearing the different perspectives, I came to learn that, just because someone might eat a turtle or eat a turtle egg, isn't a bad thing inherently. And especially since a lot of these coastal communities have been eating them for generations. And a lot of places people might not have a lot of alternatives to survive. This is actually from a beach in Costa Rica where they're allowed to collect eggs because they have this thing called an arrabada. This is a beach called Ostional where they can have a couple 100,000 turtles nesting over 4 or 5 days. And research has shown that the first eggs that are laid do not survive. They get dug up. You can see on the picture here these little white spots. Those are all eggs that have been dug up because every succeeding wave of turtles is digging up nests that were just laid. And so a lot of them don't survive. And so they find that by taking some of the eggs in the first 24 hours, it doesn't affect the total number of hatchlings. And so by selling those eggs, this community has been able to build a health clinic and a school, and it's a really important source of income without hurting the turtles. So it is a somewhat controversial program because there's a lot of people who believe that it shouldn't be legal anywhere. But I think as us as conservationists need to be flexible and need to keep community needs in mind. And so what I believe the job of a conservationist like ourselves is in these kinds of cases is to help provide alternatives so that people can still thrive and survive and thrive without eating the turtles, and education and things like that. And so that's some of the stuff that we do. So I just wanted to give that perspective because there is often a tendency for people in the West to judge somebody that might kill an elephant, might eat a sea turtle, things like that. And the point is just there's a lot of factors at play, and there's a lot of decisions that for survival that people in places like the U.S. might not be a decision that we have to make. So. In Nicaragua, if you can see in the bottom of this boat are a bunch of green turtles. They have a legal fishery there. That one I think is a bit more problematic, but it is a really important source of income and protein for these communities. And also Nicaragua has a government that's not especially worried about conservation. And so that's an issue there that's affecting a lot of turtles. You're probably aware of plastic being an issue for sea turtles. Many of you have probably seen the video of the turtle with the straw in its nose. That was taken by a good friend of mine. Has become probably the most viral video, at least in the sea turtle world. And yeah, plastic is a huge problem for sea turtles, and in every imaginable way, in all parts of their life cycle. So they can eat it because they might confuse it for jellyfish, and that happens quite often. Sea turtles are amazing animals, but they're not the smartest animals. They have these tiny little reptilian brains, and plastic bags have been around for a few decades, and so the sea turtles have not learned how to differentiate between a plastic bag and a jellyfish floating through the ocean. Plastic can also collect on nesting beaches and make it difficult for both the females to cross the beach to lay their eggs, as well as the hatchlings getting to the water. Things like fishing nets that are made out of plastic that rip off, because that happens quite frequently, and then float through the ocean are a form of ocean plastic pollution that continues fishing. It's called ghost gear, and it's an especially gigantic problem. So it's a problem everywhere, all the time, for all of the sea turtles, and something that's not getting any better anytime soon, unfortunately. Um, Climate change and fossil fuels are a major problem for sea turtles. I imagine you're all old enough to remember the BP oil spill. So, just as a quick little update, the stuff is still there. It's still on the bottom of the ocean. It's still affecting the turtles. And what the research showed afterwards was the stuff that they put on the oil to disperse it actually may have been more toxic than the oil itself. Fortunately, BP's had to pay a whole bunch of money, probably should have been more, but had to pay a whole bunch of money that went to protect sea turtles and other ocean wildlife. But as far as the conservation community is concerned, the more quickly we can phase off of fossil fuels, the better it will be for everybody, you and me and the turtles, because the drilling and spills and all the different effects of them are problems, as well as the effects of burning them. Climate change is a major problem for sea turtles. So rising sea levels are inundating turtle nesting beaches. We're seeing erosion happening quite a bit. Like you can see here, this exposed nest from a beach in Costa Rica is happening quite a bit. Coral bleaching is a big problem for sea turtles. As oceans get warmer, coral polyps will expel from the coral. And coral reefs are major sea turtle habitat. Another big thing is as the sand temperatures are rising, it is skewing the population of the sea turtles. So all reptiles, the sex of the hatchling is not determined before being laid as an egg. It's determined by the temperature of where they are in the nest. And there's a pivotal temperature around 78 degrees Fahrenheit that above that will result in females and below that will result in males. And under natural conditions, it should be about 50-50. But there have been a couple of studies that are pretty scary that have shown in places like Florida and in Australia on some nesting beaches that 99 to 100% of the hatchlings are being born female. And so, obviously, for the long term health of any population of any animal, you want balance. And so, that's another impact that we're seeing from climate change. The tortoiseshell trade, I talked about hawksbills and how they're more than 90% reduced from previous levels. And it's because of these. So tortoiseshell comes from the shell of the hawksbill sea turtle, and it is actually a misnomer. It's not a tortoise. It's sea turtle. And now this is illegal to trade internationally, has been since the 90s. Some places do still have legal sales of them, Japan in particular, which built up a huge stockpile, tons of these shells, leading up to the ban in the 1990s, and has been working off of that. But there is still an illegal trade of these. They are still shipped internationally to a certain extent, and also sold domestically in a lot of places illegally, but still happening. So we have a program where we look at this trade called Too Rare to Wear. And so this is a study we put out right in the middle of the pandemic. It got absolutely no media coverage. But the yellow countries, we've heard, small amounts of. We've heard bigger amounts, but not huge amounts in the orange countries. So in the US, we have heard of it in a few different places. And then the brown are the biggest hot spots for it. So you see a couple in Latin America and particularly in Asia, in places like China, Indonesia, places like that. Um, so how do we protect them? So there are some really great things happening out there. So I don't want to leave this presentation, don't want you to leave this presentation thinking all is lost. I know it's a very depressing time right now in the environmental field and a whole bunch of different fields, but The good news is that there's good news. So we as an organization do quite a few things to help protect sea turtles. And we'll talk a little bit about those, and then we'll talk about some of the other things that people do. So we help coastal communities protect sea turtles by providing funding for nesting beaches, for projects that help clean up and recycle plastic waste, um, by getting income into these communities and providing alternatives through things like tourism. And so we're making some pretty good progress. I need to update this slide. We have passed, or we're passing 20 million baby turtles saved. So that's on 50 different beaches around the world. We're making some real progress. And so some of the areas that conservation has been working and making advances are in the fishing industry. So this is a turtle excluder device. It's basically an escape hatch in the bottom of a shrimp net. And now in the US, still actively, all of our shrimp boats have to use these. And we will not import shrimp from anywhere that doesn't also enforce the use of them. And we will go and check. And we have banned shrimp imports from some places for not using these. And this has helped save the lives of lots and lots of sea turtles. Shrimp are a big source of food for the turtles. We're also adapting to, not our organization, but our field, our community is creating hooks that are harder for sea turtles to bite down on, creating, experimenting with things like lights on fishing nets where the turtles can see the nets and don't get caught, but the fish still swim into the net. Things like that are showing a lot of promise, and we're seeing declines in the amount of turtles getting caught in fishing gear over the past couple of decades. We're also using new types of technologies to be able to study them. This is a satellite transmitter. For the longest time, we didn't know where the sea turtles would go once they left the beach. And so by following them with these transmitters, it can tell us where they are at different times of the year so we can close off different areas for fishing, things like that. And that's really helped advance conservation. Also, making tiny little tags to put on hatchlings to follow them for their first few years. The first few years of a sea turtle's life, we call it the lost years. That's the biggest mystery because we don't know where they go and what they do in most cases. And so now we've got tiny little transmitters that we can put on the hatchlings and follow them when they go out to sea for at least the first couple of months. That's helping to answer that biggest mystery that we have in our community. Drones are helping to monitor nesting beaches, doing counts, things like that. One of the biggest things that we've learned over the past few decades is when we protect those nesting beaches for long enough so that those hatchings start returning again, we can see increases in populations. And we're seeing that happen in a number of places around the world. This is a beach in Mexico called Colola. This is the primary nesting beach for the black turtle. And to give you an idea of how this population has gone, in the 50s and 60s, they had tens of thousands of nests, but it became big industry to collect them for their meat and to collect their eggs. And most of them were taken from this beach for decades, to the point where researchers who started in the early 80s trying to protect them, by 1999, they had been reduced to 500 nests from tens, 40, 50,000 to 500. But in the year 2000, the number started growing again because they had been protecting them long enough for them to start returning. And ever since then, the numbers have been skyrocketing to the point where they are up to 70 or 80,000 nests again in only 25 years. And so it's one of the most impressive recoveries for me, definitely in sea turtles, but maybe in all of wildlife conservation, one of the most impressive stories of recovery. The biologist who works there believes that they have reached pre-human exploitation levels. And there's very few animals that you can say that about. And so there is a lot of hope for this species now. And it's a really inspiring story of a university working with a local indigenous community, the Nahua people of Mexico, to do an incredible job at bringing this turtle back from the brink. Plastic cleanup is a big thing that is happening in a lot of places. We have helped clean up more than 500,000 pounds by providing grants to local organizations to clean it up. And we're also providing grants to build infrastructure. So you can purchase and build machinery to recycle on site. And so a lot of these communities that we're supporting are creating things like fence posts or bricks for housing or souvenirs to sell to the travelers that come to visit their beaches. So they're recycling locally, they're getting that trash off the beach, and they're bringing in new sources of income for conservation and for the community. So it's like a win-win-win-win-win. So it's a program that we really love. So how are they doing? They're doing okay in some cases. So this slide here, so I showed you this earlier. So the leatherback and the loggerhead are both considered vulnerable now. Well, 15 years ago, the leatherback was listed as critically endangered and the loggerhead was listed as endangered. So they have both improved over that period of time. Now, in the last few years, because this is such a general worldwide view and it doesn't take into a lot of account a lot of the nuance of what's happening in the different places, that we are getting, more specific about it. And so a study that just came out, one of our board members was the lead author on it, and one of our staff was participated in this, where they looked at, they call them regional management units, but just think of them as like a population. So each species has different populations in different places around the world. And so this looks at 48 of these sea turtle populations among those 7 species all around the world, and it looks at what their risk is, how many of them or how few of them are there, and their threat populations. How intense are their threats? Are they a high threat or low threat? And they looked at this in 2011, and only 23% of those 48 populations were considered low risk, low threat. Now, about 15 years later, 40% of them are now low risk, low threat. So that's gone up about 50%. Fewer than 1 out of 5 of these populations are now considered high risk, high threat. And of the more than half of these 48 populations are growing. Some cases rapidly. The green turtle in particular is doing really well. And so we're actually seeing recovery happen in a number of places. The hawksbill turtle, that's one of the 2 most endangered, we're seeing numbers growing ever since the end of the legal tortoiseshell trade. So there's places in Mexico that had 100 nests that now have 1,500 nests 10 years later. And so we're seeing some fairly slow, but still quite important and impressive recovery in places like that. So as far as the ocean goes, sea turtles are doing better than most other animals, and we're really excited about that. So this particular study gets pretty in the weeds, but I just wanted to kind of go over because it's the most recent information that we have, and it's pretty optimistic about a lot of the different populations out there. So to wrap up, what can you guys do? You guys live near the coast in California. One is we suggest you go see them. We are SEE Turtles because we think that that's a really great way to show communities that these animals are important and they're worthwhile saving. And when you develop those economic incentives for people to save them, great things can happen. So there's a lot of places where you can see them. You actually can go out and see them around San Diego is probably the closest place you can see them regularly. Monterey Bay, you can probably see them out in the water. But traveling to, Hawaii, Mexico, Central America, Asia, go to see them. Go see them in the water, go see them on the beach. And that itself is a really fun thing to do and can help protect them. The nesting beach program that we have, we're supporting more than 50 beaches around the world right now. And so the funds that we raise, for every dollar that we raise, we can save at least 10 baby turtles at one of these beaches. And those funds go to these small community groups working on these beaches so that people can walk up and down the beach, make sure nobody's taking the eggs, and help getting those hatchlings out into the water. And so this has been a really effective program. The one population in particular, the Eastern Pacific hawksbill, was considered gone by a lot of people, but new nesting beaches have been found and they've been really well protected through our programs, through local organizations. And so there's renewed hope for this population of hawksbills as well. We also have a program called Travelers Against Plastic. Has a lot of ways that you can reduce your plastic use, clean it up whenever you go out into outside your house, recycle it where you can, but reduce the amount of plastic that you use in your daily life. That's obviously step number one. And so we have a lot of tips on this website about reducing plastic when you travel and also at home, at work, at school, a whole bunch of different areas. So you can check that out. Um, we also developed an app. So if you're going to a place like Costa Rica or Indonesia, places where these products are still being sold, and you want to make sure you don't buy them because they're really easy to confuse for just like, plastic or just some other kind of material. We created an app where you can snap a picture, and this has and I can put a link to it in the chat here when we're done. But you can, with this app, you can snap a picture. We have an algorithm that'll compare it and tell you with a pretty high percentage if it's real or not. And so that's a way to be able to avoid them. And then we record that data and use it for enforcement and stuff. So that's the end of my presentation. I love giving out my email. If you have any questions, if you might be interested in joining us for a trip, we go to Mexico, we go to the Galapagos. Next year, we're going to Kenya, Panama, Belize, and you're working hands-on with conservationists in these places, getting money into these communities and playing marine biologist for a few days. So we hope that you'll join us. Follow us on social media. You can find us pretty easily at SEE Turtles. And otherwise, yeah, I will stick around now for a few questions. So I'm going to go ahead and end this, and then yeah, you guys can go ahead, and I'm going to stop sharing. And then yeah, I'll pop a couple of links here into the chat, and then yeah, happy to answer some questions.
Great. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Brad. I mean, thank you for a really informative presentation and also a very encouraging presentation. And thank you
Yes.
also for the good work that you're doing. You sounds like you're keeping very, very busy, but it's paying off.
And yeah, thank you again to Noyo Center. You guys are a great organization, and I'm really excited to see, the new center that you guys build and all the great work that you guys do down there. So,
Great. We'll keep up the good work for sure.
yeah. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you.